You know, when you talk about health, the concept of health is the absence of disease. In other words, if you're not sick, you're healthy, right? We have some folks that we know that have, in fact, here about less than a month ago, I got a call from one of my members in North Sydney, and he mentioned that his younger brother had just been diagnosed with a serious illness and was probably not going to live more than a couple of weeks. And he was the healthy one. All the rest of the family had some kind of dread disease, and he didn't. And he is the one that's diagnosed, and had a quick visit with his wife because we went to the hospital to visit, or it was hospice actually, and he died the next day, within 2 weeks. So health is considered the absence of disease, but you could look very healthy, and we have some friends that within 2 months were gone. So that's what health is, right? Then the term wellness came along. You've all heard of wellness, wonderful word, great improvement over health, because wellness is it's more of an active process where you take care of your health, right? And you can actually have some serious health limitations or physical limitations and still be very well. And we're going to look at a couple examples of that in a little bit. I particularly like the word wholeness because it even goes beyond wellness. It goes to where we're actually living as whole people, even with our limitations. But for those that are Christians and believe in a higher power and life beyond here, there is hope of a whole recreative process, and where we can totally be whole. So tonight we're going to kind of introduce, and maybe you want to just go ahead and put that first slide up there, basically give a little bit of an outline of how we experience wholeness even in our world, which is seriously broken. I don't think any of us are living under illusions that our world is a perfect place or that our lives are perfect. Life is complicated on this planet today, and life is moving so fast today, which we will talk about a little bit tomorrow afternoon. So tonight we're going to introduce this concept. Tomorrow morning, in our session tomorrow morning, when you go from what I'm going to share tonight with the basic concepts of wholeness, ultimately wholeness is a person. And we're going to talk about the Creator. We're going to talk about the whole spiritual side of life that takes us to a person that can heal, that can give life beyond what we can dream here. And then tomorrow afternoon at 2 o'clock, we're actually specializing a little bit tomorrow afternoon in the whole field of wholeness, because we're going to be focusing on managing stress, managing the speed of life. And I'm going to share there some of my negative experience with burnout and the whole recovery process. So if you have some friends that are not able to be with us tonight, either here or online, share with them a little bit, and they might want to join us either in person or online. I want to tell you about a little book that I have. I originally wrote this book back, I think we first published it at about 2000 or somewhere around there. It was republished by a publisher in Australia just as COVID came out. What's that, 5 years ago now? Anyway, it came just about then. And it's a little complicated getting copies of this book, the printed one, here in Canada now. Tomorrow afternoon I will tell you how you can access that online. But we have 5 copies that we're actually going to give away tomorrow afternoon. And 2 of them are going to be left here in the church. Just anybody wants to get a copy, they can check with the pastor or maybe the health person. Someone will have access to this and can share it around. The other 3, we're going to have a process where we're going to give 3 of them away tomorrow afternoon. And I guess that will have to be limited to those that are actually here, right? Because I'm not sure we have any other process than that. Now, the other thing that I want to share before we jump in is we do have a handout tonight. And I didn't even think about the whole idea of online. We have not. Is this available for anybody watching online?
I don't
Oh,
know.
he's not right there. But what we will do, and we will figure this out for those of you watching online. I'm sure there's a way that we can actually put a PDF up online, and maybe in the morning for the next 2 sessions we can have them there ahead of time. So we apologize for those of you watching online, because we are going to be working through this evening. Now, those that are here, do you all have a pen or pencil? If not, I think the pastor has a few extras. Does everyone have one? Who does not have a pen or pencil? And by the way, you're going to need one with each of these sessions. I am one who like to have something that somebody carries away. Otherwise, if you're not just using your brain, it gets a little lazy on us. And so everybody here has a pen, pencil. You don't have one? My dear? Oh, she's going to get one. She's getting some. Oh, she didn't get a paper either, Pastor. Okay. Well, we're just going to jump in, and you will see as we go along where you can fill in some of these answers. And I like this little graphic that one of the ladies put together in our home church out in British Columbia. And you notice it has the 4 primary areas of wellness or wholeness or wellness or whatever. And it's just, I like just using that. That's a relatively new little graphic. Now let me see if I can figure out how this thing works. Here we go. So we're going to look at some definitions. I have about 3 or 4 different definitions of wholeness. And this is one that I particularly like. Wholeness is the harmonious development of the whole person. Sometimes the science folks like to kind of divide us up into bits and pieces, but we're a whole person, right? Whether that's mentally, physically, spiritually, socially, emotionally. And of course, there's 5 or 6 different areas. So wholeness is the harmonious. I like that word, harmonious. It's kind of all parts are pulling together, right, in the right way to make us the whole person. Now, this is an interesting old fella. He said, if I'd known I was going to live this long, I'd have taken better care of myself. We basically don't know how long we're going to live, do we? And those that make it to 90 plus, they're surprised. In fact, I'm surprised I've been kicking around this long. It's just, if you live this long, you have to be blessed in some fashion, right? And so we want to take care of life as long as we can. Here's another definition. Wholeness is the intentional, active awareness process of making positive choices that optimizes physical, mental, emotional, social, and spiritual well-being. Now, I like that definition. It is intentional. It's intentional. Being active with taking care of these bodies and the opportunities that comes into our mix. It's intentional awareness of making positive choices. It also includes just plain being positive, right? And it's a choice, and we'll talk more about that as we go along. And so it's intentional, active awareness, making positive choices that really optimizes in all areas of life. Now, wholeness also begins by taking individually responsibility. It is taking charge, right? And it doesn't happen automatically. You see, wholeness cannot be left to chance. We must take personal responsibility. And so that means we got to figure out what makes us tick, right? And what's the best options. And of course, we all do better in some areas than we do in others, right? We're going to do a little exercise in a few minutes that's going to help you figure that out. Because we all are doing better in some areas than in others. Now, this whole idea of taking responsibility. You know, it's amazing how we want to blame everybody or somebody. You know, you get sick and you go, and we know some of the limitations of our medical system these days. And so somebody gets ill, and then they go and they expect somebody to put them back together. And maybe that somebody isn't even there, right? So whose fault is it? We're really good at trying to find somebody, maybe sometimes other than ourselves. Well, on insurance claims, they get some interesting reactions to an accident when they fill out some of these forms. And here's a couple of them. The fellow says, the guy was all over the road. I had to swerve a couple of times before I hit him. So if the guy hadn't have been there, it wasn't my fault, his fault, right? I saw the slow-moving old gentleman as he bounced off the roof of my car. If he hadn't have been there, it wouldn't have happened. I kind of like this one. I pulled away from the side of the road, glanced at my mother-in-law, and headed over the embankment. Mother-in-law's fault. And then there's this one. I mean, this one's really creative. I was on my way to the doctor with rear end trouble when my universal joint gave way, causing me to have an accident. That one is at least creative, isn't it? But they all basically kind of try to move the responsibility. Well, here's another definition of wholeness. Wholeness is healing. You have this in your little worksheets, and you don't have to fill in anything here, but wholeness is healing, hope, and optimism, powered by love, emotional intelligence, and natural design, resulting in energy, endurance, eternal life, simplicity, and spiritual growth. That's just kind of a play on the letters. And but I think a great description of wholeness. I think this is our final definition, and this is actually one of my favorites. A couple things for you to fill in on this one. Wholeness is creating constant personal renewal, where we recognize and act on the truth that each day is a miraculous gift, and our job is to untie the ribbons. Isn't that good? I found this a number of years ago, and I adapted it a little bit from excuse me, a book called the 22 non-negotiable laws of wellness. And but personal renewal, where we recognize and act on the truth that every day is a miraculous gift. Do you believe that? Every day is a miraculous gift. And our job is to really appreciate and enjoy that gift. Untie the ribbons, right? And so the whole concept of wholeness is enjoying life as much as we can. So wholeness is being emotionally healed, relationally well-rounded, physically energized, and my thing won't give me the rest. There we go. Intellectually balanced, spiritually inspired, professionally fulfilled. Now, we're not able to go through all those tonight. We just don't have the time to dig into those. We're going to dig into about 3 of those as we go through. Now, here's a very important concept when it comes to wholeness. We can experience and enjoy a degree of wholeness even with some serious limitations. Do you believe that? And I have 3 examples here that we're going to go through very, very quickly of folks that have, and most of them still are, enjoying a degree of wholeness, even though with some very serious limitations. The first one is Sam Sullivan. I don't know if you've heard of Sam Sullivan out here in the East Coast, but we've been out in British Columbia now for about 30 years, and Sam Sullivan is one of the former mayors of Vancouver. And we were there when he ran for mayor, and he actually won, and had an interesting role there as mayor, but he became paraplegic at age 19. I think it was a skiing accident. And he had a really hard time for a number of years. He actually even considered suicide. Instead, he finished a degree, college degree, and in 2005, he became mayor of Vancouver. Now, I tell you, it's not an easy task to become mayor of Vancouver. You know, politics here in the Maritimes is relatively, I don't know what the word is. It's a much calmer environment than British Columbia. British Columbia politics are about as turmoil as they come in Canada. Nothing like the U.S., but they're a little more unpredictable and volatile in BC. And especially in Vancouver, and in a way, in the wheelchair, he did his campaigning and became mayor of Vancouver. The thing that fascinated me, and I watched this happen, if you remember back in 2006, the Olympics came to Vancouver. And a year before the Olympics come to a city, the mayor goes to wherever the Olympics were happening, and they get the flag, the Olympic flag, and they bring it to the next city. And so Sam Sullivan had that experience. And I remember hearing some of the interviews that they had with him at the time, that he was quite concerned about how in a wheelchair he was going to be able to get that flag without messing up. And I guess they had to actually do some little adjustments to his wheelchair. But if you were there following him, he just had a degree of wholeness in spite of the fact that he was a paraplegic. Now, you may have heard of Rick Hansen out here. The Maritimers have heard of Rick Hansen. The only Canadian probably more well known than Rick Hansen is who? Terry Fox. But Rick Hansen was the man in motion. He went around the world in a wheelchair. And if you remember that story, and he became a paraplegic at age 15. Now, we live right now in Williams Lake, British Columbia. And if you're familiar with British Columbia at all, Williams Lake is kind of right up there, kind of in the middle. That's his hometown. And I tell you, he's probably the most famous person from that little town of Williams Lake. But at age 15, in a trucking accident, a bunch of kids out fooling around, and he became paraplegic. And but he eventually was in the Olympics in L.A. And in 1985, he did this Man in Motion tour. And I looked it up here just the other day. But to date, his foundation and his efforts, they have raised something like $375 million for spinal cord research. Now, I have a little special connection with this fella because I pastored in Williams Lake for about 5 years. And while I was there, I joined Rotary International, that service club that serves the community. And one of the members of Rotary was a very good friend of his father. And while I was there, his father died. And he wasn't connected really with any church. And the Rotary member was not connected with any church. And so they needed some pastor to actually lead out in the funeral service. So I had a chance to meet Rick Hansen. Of course, now I think he's in his 60s now, and he's married, has 2 or 3 grown children. And but I want to tell you, he is enjoying a wholeness lifestyle. Okay? Even with his limitations. Now, you may have heard of this fella. Have you heard of this guy, Nick? If you haven't, you need to look him up online. He was born without arms or legs. Anybody heard of this guy? He was born actually to a Christian family. There was no indication during the pregnancy that there was any kind of a problem, and I guess it was back before, all the modern ways of trying to figure out what's going on. And so he just was born like this, and of course he's had some difficult times in his life. But today he has an international mission motivating and inspiring and demonstrating God's grace. And if you've listened and watched some of his material, he has there's a wholeness about this man. And so the point is, we can have a degree of wholeness living without having everything just the way maybe we think we should. Now, this particular slide, see, basically one of the hearts of wholeness is hope. If we've lost hope, we're really in trouble, right? Well, for a number of years, when we first went to British Columbia and we were coming out of Vancouver on the way to Hope. Now, if you're familiar at all with the Lower Mainland and in British Columbia, and you leave Vancouver and you're heading east, about an hour outside of Vancouver is a little town called Hope. And it's right on the Fraser River. North of Hope, about 35, 40 kilometers, there is a place on the Fraser River called Hell's Gate. It's where the river goes through some rocks, and it's very narrow. Fraser River is a big river, and this water comes crashing through there, and it's narrow, and they call it Hell's Gate. You can actually go and walk over the top of it and watch that water come through. But for years, they had an old truck like this parked by the side of the road, just as you came into Hope. And it actually said, I was fascinated by this, so I had to take a picture. And I just kind of adapted a couple little things here. But it basically said on the side of the truck, Hell's Gate, 35 minutes beyond hope. And sure enough, if you're driving up to Trans-Canada and you turn off at Hope, it's just about 35 minutes to Hell's Gate on the Fraser River. But as I got to thinking about this, if we lose hope, we're really at Hell's Gate, aren't we? And so the whole purpose of this weekend, the whole purpose of this series is to actually strengthen and give us the hope that will keep us going and challenge us to full wholeness. Now we're going to take a few minutes now, and boy, I forgot to even ask, and our gentleman back there, I'm not sure how we do this, I forgot to tell him, but for the next 5 or 10 minutes, these folks are just going to be doing this exercise, and I'm not even going to be talking, so I'm not sure how we manage that online. On your handout on page 3, it'll take probably about 5 minutes to do this, and then we'll talk about it a bit. But here's the exercise, so just listen to me while I explain this very carefully, because there's 2 or 3 segments of this that's very important. So first of all, you go through, and there's the 6 major factor areas, and there's 5 questions on each one of these. So as you read these, you give yourself a score between 1 and 5, and you notice the guidelines there at the top. Let's just read the first one there under the physical factor. Number 1, I am generally relaxed and unworried and regularly sleep well. So you can't sleep unless you're relaxed, right? So if you're sleeping well and you're generally relaxed and you don't get ruffled by very much, then you would get 5. If you are not sleeping and you are uptight, you are high-strung, then you get 1. And you decide in between where you fit, okay? And so you do that with all of those questions, and you get a little score down at the bottom. Now we'll come back and just talk about that in a minute. But before I stop talking, though, let's go to the next page. And once you finish that, once you get your score, and you want to add up your score, by the way, for each one of those. You notice there's the overall score, and then you get a score for each of those factors, okay? So once you've finished, you go to the next page, and you see those circles at the top? The physical factor got way over there. That physical factor should be right over there in the middle on the top. He got shot over there somehow. But let's just take the physical factor. And let's suppose your score on the physical factor is 3. So you take your pencil or your pen and you shade in from the middle out to 3 on the physical factor, okay? And you do that for all of those 6 areas, okay? And then eventually we'll compare your wheel to the bicycle down below, okay? All right, any questions on that? Okay, so let's just jump in there and do that. Do you have a pen? Hey, you want one? So everyone has a pen or a pencil, right? Because you're going to need some kind of marking tool. I think everybody has one. Okay, so I'm just going to keep quiet for a bit. Why don't you just leave that last graphic up there, the one with the quiz, just leave that one up. that you can do whenever. And let's just take a minute and look at how the scores went. Did anybody get a score over 130? Well, she needs an award. Well, very good. Anybody between 110 and 130? That's also very good, by the way. Very good. We get 2 or 3. Hey, that's good. And then what about between 90 and 110? Yeah, we got some in that category. And that means that everyone else is under 90? Well, several folks haven't kind of got theirs done. But you notice just the differences there. Now, did you all get a chance to shade in the wheel? So how is your wheel? Is it nice and smooth? Or is it a bit bumpy? Like you notice the bicycle down below? The wheel's a little bumpy, wouldn't you think? So anybody got a nice smooth wheel? Yes, I was thinking with your score it had to be looking pretty good. I had a gentleman in one seminar, this is years ago, because I haven't actually used some of this material for a while, but this guy, his overall score was about 2. But his wheel was smooth. He wasn't doing well in any of the areas. He was at least consistent. And so, you can, not be, I don't know if he even thought about some of this until he came to that class. But the smoother your wheel, really the better you're enjoying life. Sometimes even if you need to address a bunch of things, right? Because I've also had folks, there's 6 areas here, and they're doing wonderful in 5. And they got 1. The score was 1, so they had this big bump, right? So the point is to try to have all these areas working as much together as possible. So any questions or comments on any of this, on this particular little exercise? Was it helpful? Or did you already know that's where you were? It's interesting that sometimes we do this and we're not surprised with the score. But I've had folks very surprised, especially some of the folks that were doing very well in about 3 or 4 of the areas, and then they had this big bump in a couple of the others, because sometimes we all do well in certain areas, and in other areas we're not doing so good, right? Okay. All right, so let's jump in from here. So we've done this little wholeness review. Gives you kind of a bit of an idea. By the way, this little graphic at the bottom here, whether it's wellness or wholeness, this is kind of a combination type of thing. But if you're kind of in the neutral spot, it's not necessarily the best spot. But there's a lot of folks in the neutral spot. But if you're on the more wholeness end, you're more aware, you've had more education in the whole area of wholeness, and you're growing. The other side is there's a lot of signs and a lot of symptoms. It eventually goes into disability, and of course, death is end result. Eventually. Although it's amazing how some folks with all kinds of poor health still somehow live a long time very miserable. You know, it's kind of sad sometimes, but it sometimes just works that way. Oh, here's the bicycle. We've already talked about this. Your ride is either smooth or a little more bumpy. So for the rest of our time, we're going to focus on really three areas. Very briefly, we're going to touch on the physical side. We'll focus a little bit more on the emotional and the spiritual side of well-being. And so that's kind of what we're going to do. We want to be physically energized. We want to be emotionally healed. You know, we've all been damaged by the fall, right? We've all been damaged with, you know, if you've lived life any length of time, you've bumped into something that has really challenged you one way or the other. It's just the way life is on this planet. And emotionally, sometimes we need serious healing. And then there's the whole spiritual side, and we'll get into that just a little bit tonight. So let's talk about being physically energized in an exhausted society. Have you noticed how tired everybody is? Have you noticed that? Now, I don't know if all the folks here tonight or those that are watching are Seventh-day Adventists. I assume many may not be. But you know, those of you that are Seventh-day Adventists and endeavor to take a day off every week for rest, it is amazing how tired we all are. Sabbath morning can be the most tiring part of the week. In fact, I've been at enough congregations on a Saturday morning that I eventually got to the point that I would say, listen, maybe the best thing for you to do during this hour is have a nap. Because they're there, but they're not there. You know what I'm saying? And so how can we be physically energized? And we're just going to look, I mean, there's a number of things. I'm just going to touch on three very important ones. Well, I'm jumping ahead here. Physical wholeness is getting regular physical activity, adequate rest, and eating good food, while avoiding anything. Boy, we got something jumped there. In a way, it's avoiding the things that are harmful, right? And so those are the three that we're really going to focus on here. I'm not going to talk much about physical activity tonight. There's enough information out there. We all know that we need to be getting adequate, what's the word? Exercise. Physical activity, sometimes called exercise. I kind of like this little cartoon. The guy comes to the doctor, and he's very busy. And so the doctor says, what fits your busy schedule better? Exercising 1 hour a day or being dead 24 hours? Can't get much more blunt than that, right? So it's amazing in our busy society, and it's interesting how exercise can be the one that we end up not doing. So basically, I'm just going to mention tonight that this is a critical thing when it comes to managing energy. I do want to spend a little bit more time on rest, because folks don't realize the importance of rest. In fact, I talked to somebody just a couple of weeks ago, and actually I was talking to him again today, but he ended up in the hospital. He went to, they had to go to emergency. And in talking with him this week, he finally realized that the reason was that he had overextended himself and had not got enough sleep. And it caused a whole bunch of things going on in his body, that once he actually got enough rest, he recovered. Blood pressure went back to normal. Some of the other stuff all worked out. In his case, it was just plain overwork, just not stopping long enough to let the body restore. But nature's restorer is adequate rest. Here's an interesting statement by a sleep researcher in the U.S. We have become a civilization of zombies who are sacrificing sleep just to keep up. And that's why on a Sabbath morning, we got to show up, but we haven't showed up, right? Just a little story on that. I was in Windsor, Ontario, the Adventist church one Sabbath morning, and I was doing some health talk on something. I don't remember just what the topic was, but somewhere in there we were end up talking about rest. And I actually said to this fairly large congregation, I said, sometimes, I gave them permission, that's what it was. I said, if you're just sitting there trying to keep your eyes open and you just can't, just take a 10-minute nap. As long as you don't make any noise, we won't wake you up. Well, on the way out afterwards, this young fellow, I'm sure he wasn't 30, he came up to me and he said, Pastor, I don't know what in the world you said the first half, but I woke up just as you said it was okay to have the nap. He said, the first half, I don't know what that was about, but the second half was pretty good. So I'll take half, right? And so sometimes a Friday night can be that way too, but you guys are you're quite alert for it being a Friday night. I'm quite impressed. But adequate rest. And what is adequate rest? Adequate rest for most folks is somewhere between 8 and 10 hours a night sleep. Now you just think about it. Not everybody needs 8 to 10 hours. The thing that really irritates me are these folks that only need 4 or 5. See, life's just not fair. There's folks, 4 hours a night sleep. In fact, I had a fellow in one of my classes a few years ago. He said, I can only sleep 4 hours. I try to sleep 6 or 7, and it's just irritating. I said, listen, if you only need 4 hours, don't waste your time trying to sleep, right? But if you need 6 or 8, get the 6 or 8, right? Now, as we get a little older, it gets more irregular. Some folks don't need a lot of sleep as we get older. I'm sometimes good at 4 or 5, 6 hours a night sleep, provided I get a couple naps during the day. I'm just not somebody can go and without, enough rest. But sometimes you don't get it at night. But you try to get a good night's sleep, and then a day off for what's the word? Rest. And regardless of your background, you need a day off for rest. Now, folks that take a day off for rest, whether that is what we as Adventists call Sabbath or Saturday, or folks that take Sunday for a day of rest, or I know folks that take a day during the week. I read a book years ago when I was recovering from burnout. A pastor, actually, who really believed in taking a day of rest, but he did it on a Tuesday, right? The whole point is you find a time to get adequate rest, right? And so rest is very critical, very important if you're going to have wholeness. And this one I'm not going to talk much about either, because I'm assuming you all know what good food is. Right? Good food. Food that's nourishing food. I like this one-sentence university course on nutrition by Dr. John Scharfenberg. I think Dr. Scharfenberg is still living. I think he's in his late 90s. When he was about 70 years old, I lived in Newfoundland for 10 years. And when we were living in St. John's for a while, we actually brought John Scharfenberg to Newfoundland for a week. We had him do presentations at the university there and all over the place. And I had set all that up. And I followed him around for a week when he was 70. I was only what? I don't know if I was 40 by then. But I followed him around for a week, and you have no idea how happy I was to put him on the airplane. I need to have a week to recover, because that guy was full of energy, right? And but he was a professor of nutrition at Loma Linda University for a number of years. But this one sentence, just think about this one sentence on nutrition. Eat at the proper times a variety of natural foods in quantities to maintain ideal weight. Now think about that. Eat at the proper times. For some people, that might be twice a day. For some people, that might be 3 times, maybe more times. There's different, I tell you, there's different bodies do all kinds of funny different things. But eat whatever is the proper times. What is it that works best for you, right? A variety of natural foods. Now, they don't necessarily, when it says natural foods, I know John Scharfenberg well enough that he's not talking about the can that says natural on it, right? He's talking about foods, whole foods, as close to grown as you can get them, right? Because today we've abused that word natural so bad. I mean, you can get natural potato chips, right? You can get natural all kinds of stuff, but it's all the same thing, right? So in quantities that maintain ideal weight, and ideal weight is different with everybody, right? So we got to kind of figure out what works best for us. So that's just simply eating good food, which will increase your energy. So that's just a few little things on the whole physical side. I like this little cartoon. It's the hottest new diet. You attach this special modem to your stomach, and you upload your fat to a skinny person on the internet. Technology is interesting, isn't it? Yeah. Let's talk about emotional healing. By the way, something I should have said a while ago. We're a relatively small group here in this group. But if you have a question, you have a comment, as we're going along, just jump on your chair, wave your arms, and I'll get my attention. And otherwise, I just keep going, right? So if you have a comment or a question, just get my attention, and we'll deal with it right there. Emotional health is the ability, now this is an interesting definition. Emotional health is the ability to feel and express the entire range of human emotions and to control them, not to be controlled by them. Now, our emotions are neither good nor bad, right? Did you know that? Our emotions are really neither good nor bad. They just happen, right? And but if we're not careful, they can control us in ways that we don't want to be controlled. And so emotional health is being able to manage your emotions and not be controlled by them. Now, whoops, I hit the wrong button the wrong way. By the way, also emotional health is learning how to give and receive love, joy, and peace. There are some folks that can soak up love like a sponge, and they can't give anything. And there's other folks that can give and give and give, but they can't receive, right? Emotional health is where we have a balance between those two. We can give, but we can receive, and it works best that way. My therapy is simple. How many of you have a dog? Anybody here have a dog? Yeah, some of you have a dog. My therapy is quite simple. I wag my tail and lick your face until you feel good about yourself again. Dogs are very good on that, aren't they? And they always like you. Isn't that something? They always like you. They'll wag their tails even if you have taken something from them they really want. Anyway, so let's just take a moment and look at some of the keys to emotional health. And we can't really get into these and explore them in any kind of detail, but the outline here is very important. We all have some emotional traumas, if you've lived life any length of time. And make sure you resolve emotional traumas, especially the ones that are very serious and really affecting your life. And sometimes that means getting professional help. And that professional help could be as simple as talking to a friend, or it could be finding, a good professional counselor. It's amazing how many people go to their physician with emotional concerns, and the best your physician can do is give you some kind of medication. Whereas a good counselor can help you work through that and resolve it. And so if you're struggling with some of that, then find a good counselor. And it may be as simple as just talking with someone. Like I'm not a counselor. I'd be a terrible counselor. But I can recognize if somebody needs some counseling. And I have sent folks to, when I was actually pastoring regularly, I knew a number of folks in town that were very good counselors. And I have sent folks 5 sessions, and these folks are healed, different people. It's just amazing how that works. And so if you need that help, get it. It could be from grief, it could be loss, it could be some form of abuse, whatever it is. Yeah, this talking about grief, sometimes folks don't realize grief is not just the loss of a loved one. We experience grief with any loss. I remember one of the churches that we attended when we were in Kelowna, BC. I had a good friend there who had a big black lab, not black lab, he was a chocolate lab. In fact, his name was Chocolate. No, his name was Hershey, which is chocolate, right? And this dog died. I mean, he just got old and died. He'd had him for a long time. It must have been 8 months later. We had got together for something, and he said, it's been 9 months since my dog died. And today's the anniversary date. He says, why does that still bother me? He was a dog. But he was very attached to that dog. That dog was a good friend, right? All these fires, you guys have a few little fires out here in the East Coast. You don't have any fires over here on PEI, right? You ever had any forest fires don't happen over here, right? You got too much moisture, or enough moisture, right? But there's a few in New Brunswick, Nova Scotia this year. BC, man, we have serious fires. We have actually been, what's the word? Evacuated 2 serious times and 1 not so serious time. So 3 times in the last, 10 years, 12 years? Anyway, there's just a lot of fires going on out there, all right? Now, notice number 2. Choose to be what? What's the word? Positive. Choose to be positive. Is that a choice? You know, we live in an extremely negative world. You know, all the news, they don't give us any positive news, right? It's not news unless it's a disaster, right? But we can choose to be positive. We can choose to be optimistic. If you can't, then you may need to heal from some trauma, all right? Because we can choose. Forgiveness is also a powerful emotional healer. Forgive. Forgive others and forgive yourself. We all understand how sometimes we have to forgive others, right? You know, somebody does something that really hurts us. Sometimes folks will do something that they never recognize that it hurt us. And sometimes we have to forgive for our own benefit so we can unload the junk. Sometimes we have to forgive ourselves. You know, the classic example of this, and I saw this with my own eyes, when I was doing mainly stress management seminars, but a variety of other types of things. But I had a contract with a couple of the national parks up in the Rocky Mountains. There's a bunch of national parks up through there. And this one particular park, they had about 75 employees, and they had worked out a thing with me where I went back a number of times, and we had some stress profile type things that we did. And I think I went back there 5 or 6 different times and met with their whole employee group. And there was this fellow who came to every session, because they had to be there. And but he really wasn't there. You know, he was there, but he wasn't there. You know, he was there, but he wanted to be somewhere else. I mean, you only had to look at him. He wasn't there. The second to the last session that I was there, he comes up to me and he says, because we had a very comprehensive stress management profile that cost extra money, and then this employee group could access, and he said, I think I need to do that. So I gave him one. And when he mailed it back to me, and I ran it through the computer, and I looked at this thing, and I thought, boy, I need to have a talk with this guy. So I called him up, and I said, look, I'm coming back up here in a week or so. I think we need to meet, because there's something not right here, and I can't quite figure out what the problem is. But you're not doing well, but I don't know what the problem is. So I go to meet him in his office, and he starts telling me this story. He had been the park ranger for 25 years. Loved the job. I'm not sure what all the park ranger did, but they roamed all around through the park, and he just loved this job. And had been doing it for 25 years. He's now in his late 50s. And a year before I showed up, he had some kind of a conflict with administration. And whether they wouldn't do something he wanted done, I don't know what it was. But he quit. He said, okay, I'm not going to do the job anymore. But because of his age and just he only had a few years to retirement, they put him in an office. And he was miserable. He literally was miserable. Now, what had triggered him to do the profile and have a visit with me was at the time I was there before, the new guy who was taking his job that they had just hired as the new park ranger was just starting the job. So that was especially irritating to him. And it just made everything worse. And so I listened to this whole story. And when he finished, I said, you know what you have to do? You have to forgive yourself. You did a very stupid thing. You didn't need to resign, but you did. And you convinced everybody you were done. So they hired somebody else. And whose fault was it? And he had not even thought of that before. I mean, the light suddenly went on. I made this mess. I didn't have to do this. And who did he need to forgive? Wasn't even the boss's fault. So sometimes we have to forgive others. Sometimes we have to forgive ourselves, and we need to almost live in an atmosphere where we are forgiving, right? And it's just a powerful tool. And if we can't, and sometimes the issue can be so severe that you need professional help to even get to that point, right? And then learn how to receive and give love. We talked about this a little bit earlier, but this is very, very important when it comes to emotional health. And some can give or receive it a whole lot easier than others. For some it can be very hard. It's a matter of, again, learning that whole process. Now this is just one that I can just kind of introduce, but it's a very, very important one. Understand and master emotional intelligence. Have you heard that term? Whole book's written on it. I mean, we could do a whole seminar on emotional intelligence. You know, we hear a lot about IQ, right? How smart you are, right? But emotional intelligence is actually probably equally, if not more important. It's the ability to monitor and regulate your life and your feelings. And so those are some of the keys to emotional health. And our best we can do in a little seminar like this is just kind of trigger some of these thoughts, and then you figure out where you're doing well and where do you need some help, right? And it all comes back to how we relate to those things. Now, I kind of like this. You can live a perfectly normal life. This is Dad talking to the son. You can live a perfectly normal life if you accept the fact that your life will never be perfectly normal. That's true, isn't it? Another component of this is expectations. You know, it's been a few years ago now that I began to understand the difference between expectations and an expectancy. You know, if you expect folks to respond a certain way and they don't, what happens? You're disappointed. And you can be severely disappointed. But if you have no expectations and they do something really good, what happens? You are pleasantly surprised. You know, I've pastored a number of churches over the years, and I bet the pastor here can relate to this. You know, sometimes pastors have expectations of members of the congregation or the church as a whole. I finally got to the point that I have absolutely no expectations. When I came to North Sydney in April, I had no expectations. Now, I was very pleasantly surprised. It's been a nice experience. I mean, they're a nice little group. they're just a bunch of humans, so they're a few, a little messed up in a few things here and there. But overall, it has been a very enjoyable experience. And but if I went there with a whole bunch of expectations, right? And you think about that with your kids. Shirley and I, both of us have a very good relationship with our girls and their spouses and our grandkids. But one of the keys is that we really don't have a whole lot of expectations, right? There's parents trying to control their kids and expecting them to do this and that and 100 other things. Something that's fascinated me with these two girls is both couples are very good parents, but their parenting styles is very different from ours, right? But just very different. We try to put people into molds, our mold. So sometimes just a wise thing is we have to just realize that nothing is quite as normal as we'd like to think it is. Well, we got just a few minutes left, and I'm going to go through some of this fairly quickly because our time is running out. Spiritually inspired in a spiritually confused society. Is the society around where you live confused spiritually? Oh my dear, today, and it's not only in the spiritual realm, it's just kind of where we're at with technology and a whole variety of things to try to sort out truth from error, getting more and more complicated, isn't it? I mean, you don't know. Every once in a while we're driving, Shirley's got her phone and she'd come up with this video, she's listening to this thing, and they have no idea whether there's any truth to it. 90% chance there isn't any, right? But how can we be spiritually inspired in all the confusion? See, spiritual wholeness, and this is important, spiritual wholeness is finding meaning in life. Meaning is the word you write in there. It's finding meaning in life and living with purpose and passion. It's living consistent with your beliefs and values. See, going back to expectations, we can't expect somebody else to be living by our beliefs and our values, even if they're in our families, right? We have to let people sort that out. And but for ourselves, and really in this part, we're looking at how we individually relate to this. And the question is, have you found the secret of meaning in your life? That is really what spirituality is in a very general sense. It is believing in a higher power and discovering peace with both life and death. Here's the question for you tonight as we kind of pull this together a bit. But are you enjoying life? Are you at peace with life? I mean, life's too short not to be at peace with ourselves, with life. And we have to also be at peace with, there's no guarantee we're going to wake up in the morning, right? And if we do wake up, there's no guarantee you're going to survive tomorrow. There's no guarantee. We do a fair bit of driving, and we always have prayer that the Lord would take care of us as we're driving. And when you think of all the possibilities that could happen to you being killed just driving from here to Moncton, right? I mean, you wouldn't even be able to get out of your car. You wouldn't even get to the car, right? But we have to be at peace with life and death. And so, Just 4 spiritual disciplines that can help. The first is prioritize some quiet, it's a daily quiet time, right? Prioritize some time for yourself to think and to pray and to process. And nurture an open mind. Be constantly seeking for truth. And find the sources of truth that you can depend on and trust. Spiritual maturity includes being tolerant and understanding of others and watch for opportunities to serve. Ultimately, wholeness is a person. We're going to talk about this tomorrow morning. A whole session on a person that can help us heal and give wholeness in the best sense of that word. And that is the whole spiritual side. Here's another little cartoon I like. The driver education teacher requests an exemption from the ban on prayer during school-sponsored activities. Yeah, he thought he better pray as he's trying to teach these kids how to drive. I thought this was an interesting one. I have never seen the congregation praying harder, Pastor. And the deacon says they're texting. Yeah. Well, because of time, we're going to have to skip this little exercise, but you can do this when you get home. Look at this cartoon. How are you at decision making in the interview? Do you want an answer right away? Yeah. So yeah, it's decision time. And we don't have time to do this exercise. I talk too much here. But take some time and think through what we've talked about tonight. And here's the exercise. Write in there one thing that you're going to start doing because it's going to improve your wholeness, your wellness, your life. Something that you're not currently doing, but you know it would be beneficial. Then something you're going to stop doing. We all know some things we need to stop doing. And then something you're going to keep doing. All right? I'm going to jump right over that and go to this final couple of slides, and then we're going to be done. Here's a good reason. I'm going to give you in a minute a very good reason why you need to focus on wholeness and living well. Because hospitals are getting very, very high tech. Have you noticed that? Well, notice this. Here's this guy. He's in the bed. Very serious illness. Frankly, the doctor says we're stumped. In other words, they don't know what to do to help. So we'd like to try turning you off and then turning you back on. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to be around after if you have some comments or some questions because our time is pretty well gone. So I'm just going to turn the time back over to the pastor and we're finished.
Thank you very much. We thank you so much. I really like it. I believe if we start practicing that, start, stop, and keeping, our life going to be easier. We thank you all for coming tonight. And I'm going to ask the pastor, we have 2 books to give away today. And we have decided to give this book away for the person who came first, the first and the second one. The first and the second one.
We only have the one here tonight.
Yes, but we're gonna ask you to sign them and put some thoughts there. And tomorrow morning, when everyone is here, we want to invite you to come forward and we want to give you the book. What do you think about? So we want to share with you. This is a cooling down the soup, the stress. So please write some thoughts and sign it, and we're going to give it to the two persons that came first, the first and the second one. So in the afternoon, we have 3 more books. We have decided to give this book to somebody who brings a friend that has never come to the church. Wow. That's complicated, right? Very complicated. But if you have somebody, and you bring somebody tomorrow who has never come to the church, so we have 3 more books. So we want to decide tomorrow to whom we want to give them. Okay? For tonight, we want to finish this. We want to sing hymns 530, keeping in mind that when our life is resting in God, in Jesus, as Paul says, we are in Jesus, it is well with my soul. So let's stand up. 5:30, Pastor, at the end, you lead us with prayer, so to finish. And it is well. It is well. When peace like a river attendeth my way, when sorrows like sea billows roll, ever my Lord thou hast taught me to say, it is well, it is well with my soul. It is well with my soul. It is well with my soul. My sin, all the cure of this glorious thought. My sin, not in part, but the whole. Nailed to the cross, and I live no more. Praise the Lord, praise the Lord, oh my soul. It is well with my soul. It is well with my soul. And Lord, is a day when my patient resides. The cross mirror was as a scroll. The trumpet shall sound, and the Lord shall descend. Even so, it is well with our soul. It is well with our soul. It is well with my soul.
Heavenly Father, we thank you for this time that we could spend together and review some important principles. We just invite you now to come into each of our lives and renew us in your grace. Give us just the wellness, the wholeness, the grace that we need. And give us all a good night's rest tonight in Jesus' name.
Amen.
Amen.
Amen. We welcome all for coming. And tomorrow morning, we are starting a Sabbath school at 9:30. And we are going to be discussing about what are the monuments you are leaving to your children. 9:30 tomorrow. Have a good night, and God bless you all.